The primary purpose of Innovative AAC Solutions, the podcast, is to educate and inform. The views expressed during all episodes are solely those of the individuals involved and do not constitute educational or medical advice. They are not necessarily the views of Special School District of St. Louis County. Hey Bridget, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
We are just moving right along through the semester and through this amazing season of GLP and AAC for the podcast. So I feel like we're in a good place, but we're still in a busy place. And so today, we've highlighted a lot of people doing things outside of the district, but I really wanted to talk to somebody who I know is doing some amazing things inside the district. So today, I had a chance to sit down with an amazing SLP, Justine Gamblin, and we have been working, and she has been doing some amazing things with GLPs here at SSD. Uh, I don't know how many people have dove in as much as she has dove in, but I know it's something that's near and dear to her heart and something we're really just like trying to support.
Yeah, when you see something working and you see the progress that kids can make, it's so exciting to really feel like you have a rejuvenated sense of therapy with these kids.
Absolutely. And one of the things Justine has been doing, and I think it might be helpful for other listeners, is she's been getting permission from families to video so that she can watch back and share with the team and just kind of look back and see what she's doing. And one of the things that we've talked about is one of the strategies that you and I go back and forth with and try to share with people is just this idea of the power of pausing and less is more because we naturally, as SLPs, want to fill in the silence and give all these models. And the more models we give, the more they're going to pick up. But there's so much power when you have a GLP in letting them lead and waiting for them to initiate. And so through videoing, we've kind of found these pockets of, okay, we probably could wait a little longer here and we could see, oh, did you catch that? Oh, I heard something. What do you think that utterance was? Particularly ones that aren't clear.
That's such a good tip, and it's so actionable for all of us. It feels maybe a little scary to videotape ourselves, but that's really where that reflection piece can come in, and we can really see some good changes. It's so cool that Justine's willing to do that.
Yeah. Well, and I always tell people I am the first one to be like, I need a video because I do talk way too much. Like even just my natural cadence is fast and I will go out and will video it and I'm like, man, I talked too much. And I didn't feel like at the time I did. So I think it can be really powerful to video and to just try to, as much as possible, encourage each other as teammates to pause. But Justine has a lot more insight on it. So I think this is just a natural point of where we could just lead into our interview with Justine Gamblin. Well, welcome back to Innovative AAC Solutions. I can't wait to introduce you guys to our next guest because we're going to keep diving into all that is GLP this season. This is the lovely Justine Gamblin. Justine, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Why don't you tell the listeners a little bit about your background as far as AAC and just give us any little tidbits that you think would be helpful to get to know you.
Okay, I'm Justine Gamblin. Right now, I am in a classroom that mostly has students with autism, but I've worked with students that were in like a functional setting with POD. I've worked with a variety of AAC. But before I was at SSD, I always was kind of intimidated with AAC just because of the technology portion of it. I loved the actual therapy, but I remember always being on phones. This was way before iPad because I'm old. So it was like being on phones with reps and trying to figure out how to things. But now that I'm with SSD, I feel like I have Laura. She is actually my on-com facilitator that is there to support me. So I'm not like in this alone. So I have somebody, because I know how to turn it off and turn it back on to fix it, but I have somebody else who knows how to fix it. So now I feel really confident that I can do all of the things AAC.
I think that we all feel a little bit of imposter syndrome, and so it's so relatable. And you mentioned you're an SLP, and how long have you been with the district now?
Right now, I've been with the district 5, and then I was at a previous district for 7, and then I was in the hospital for a year. I decided that was not for me.
Okay, yeah. And that's the beauty of being an SLP. We can wear those hats in all different settings. And then I don't think you mentioned which district you're at and which school, if you want to
Oh,
highlight
I'm
that.
at Rockwood at Blevins.
Yes, Blevins Elementary. So you get to work with a wide range of ages there as well, though.
Yeah, K through 5.
Beautiful. So, this season we're diving into all this Gestalt language processing. So I'm curious what your experience as an SLP has been with that topic, what prior training you've had, and let's just start there. Like, what's your background there?
Okay, so I did the GLP training from the Meaningful Speech last year. So I'm pretty new to it. But before that, I felt always kind of a little bit lost because my grad school training was always kind of like this reward. Let's compliant based, let's trick the kids into working for us. So, like you answer a WH question, you get a piece of your train. So they would like therapy, but it wasn't the same. And I always felt a little bit like, even whenever I went into my classroom that I have now, it was like you work for 25 minutes, you play for 5 minutes. But I was always like, that's the best part, that 5 minutes. I heard that kid talk more at the train table than I've heard him talk all day. So I've always kind of started pushing into that play-based kind of therapy, but I didn't have the stages to go through. I didn't have the systematic resources that I could give people of what I'm doing. Because I have and at great AC, I have a great principal, but it's always this little bit of like, are they going to walk by my room and be like, Justine's playing again? She's having another free day. So it's good to have that information to give people of why I'm doing this. Before I always did like music, because I always knew that my autistic students would pick up on the music, but I just didn't have that why are they doing that kind of thing. I remember right out of grad school, I had a student who scripted Star Wars all the time. And that was like the only verbal speech that he had was scripting this. And the teacher came to me and was like, how are we going to get him to stop? And I was just like, it's the only words he has. Like, I don't know how we're going to get him to stop, but I don't want him to stop either. Like I know that that's what I have to work with right now, but I just struggled with answering her. And even a couple of my students that I still have, I've struggled with because of the way I was previously taught on how to do speech therapy. I have one student that I did prompt him to speak, and I just have this over prompted way. I brought out a box that I knew had this really cool toy that he was going to love, and I brought it out and I said to him, "Oh no, the box is closed," trying to get him to say open. And now every time I pull out that box, he'll say, "Oh no, the box is closed." I'm like, oh, if I would have done just this functional, let's open, he would have had that. So I'm just kind of working backwards with some of the things that now I know better. I did also struggle with another student who's stuck in that I want, which the training specifically mentions. He does this I want script whenever he gets like upset or in crisis. And now I know it's because he doesn't have that in his communication repertoire to refuse all of those things that he's actually trying to say that he's mad. So he'll go through this, I want this, I want this, I want this, just trying to get like that comfort if he wants something to change with what's going on with him right now. So I have just kind of struggled in the past before I had this training.
And I feel like there's so many things that we can unpack in the levels of in the examples that you just gave. Even I love that you highlighted what I think we all feel, which is that clinically, we're all clinicians and we're using clinical judgment to try to individualize whatever our students need. And so we were finding these kids that were getting stuck or that they weren't making natural, I like to call it natural language connections, right? It's either survival language or just kind of grabbing things, or maybe they have something and then it's not consistent and they're not able to say it autonomously without prompts, right? How many of our kids are over prompted, like you mentioned? And but we can't put our finger on the why, but we just know clinically, like, well, I know this kid responds to music, and I know this kid responds when I pull out this specific toy, but I don't have the background. So it sounds like you were like me, you didn't have the background knowledge until this course that you were able to take, and it kind of generated all the reasons like oh, okay, I was doing the right thing, but now I have the why.
Right, right.
Um, Any other strategies that you felt like worked or any other struggles that you saw
Oh,
with students?
Oh, do you want me to go into like what I learned now and like what I do
Sure.
now?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so the first thing that was like eye-opening was acknowledging anything, like acknowledging all of the communication that they're doing. I've always been done the total communication, but why would scripting be left out of that? Was kind of this thing. It's like, why did we always leave out scripting? And always like the being the detective, trying to figure out what they're trying to say. I have one student who says, "It's a baby fish." I still have not figured out where it came from, but I know that he means I'm excited. This is something good that's happening. It's a baby fish. So it's probably something that came up and like showed up like something exciting happened in that show or whatever it was. I've learned to talk less. That was been really hard. One of my students had, whenever I was talking, like I do now, I write my goals for language samples. So it's every 6 weeks, take our data through a language sample. And then it's a lot of work at 6 weeks, but it's not any work that whole time. It's just the playing and the fun. So whenever I took my video of him, and what had happened was we were playing under the table and the lights go off if they don't think people are in the room. It's like an energy saving thing. And the lights went off and he looked at me and he goes, "Darkness." And I was like, "Okay, we're going to use this." And so like we're pretending like we're asleep. And then I waved my arm and he was like, "Let's wake up. Let's wake up." Well, I said at first, "Let's wake up. Let's wake up." And then he loved that. And so I let him play with like my little lamp in my room. And he kind of like, and I pretended like I was asleep. And it felt like forever to me. Like in that moment, I felt like I'm going to have to say something. He's not doing anything. And eventually he did say, "Let's wake up," and said it like to me. And I was like, yes, he did it. And when I watched it back, it was not that long. Like I need to stop talking so much. I give him some time to process. And then that same student that night we had like best buddies. And so it was like after school and all those rooms were dark that we weren't in. And he goes, "Darkness, let's go." And I was like, he's asking me to play with it because this was a student that never, like, I was always watching him play because he wasn't really engaging me. So it was just super exciting. So definitely talk less, child led, make it full of expressions. But once they're in that stage, not to mess with their play. Like, otherwise, you're just going to make them mad. Let them line up, let them do whatever they want to do. That was definitely something that I learned. And then building up their communication repertoire. They can't only have requests. They can't only have the "I want." They have to make sure that they're able to, whatever you do your language sample, that they're able to do those other things. Some things that I found that were hard is kind of in the schools, you're going to have a lot of demands put on our kids. They have a lot of demands put on them all the time. So just educating kids. I do a push-in language group, and I've heard paras tell me that that's super helpful for them to see how I'm interacting with the kids so that they can do it. So just some education through modeling of what you're doing instead of kind of having directly tell them.
So I have two follow-up questions. One, I want to go back to the language sampling because I think that that is a question that comes up of just SLPs in general, particularly the school-based SLPs of like, okay, but I have to take data, or my AC is asking for more specific data or more regular data, or I have to do Medicaid billing, whatever that looks like. So you mentioned you're going to take those language samples every 6 weeks, and then what any other follow-up points, whether it be your charting or what does that look like for you?
So I look at them and then I do that 50%. And then that's where stage I grade them at as where they are in there, in that. And then I also look at their communication repertoire. Do they have refusals? Do they have transitions? Do they have self-advocacy? I just kind of look at what kind of communication they have as some data too, as well.
Do you have your own data sheets, or are you just writing on like a post-it, or are you using something from the course? What does
I
that look
use
like?
therapy log and then I just kind of make it into it because then it's all digital. I have to do therapy log anyway. So
Right.
that's what I've been using. It's
Okay,
just kind
perfect.
of narrative within therapy log.
And then my other question was you had mentioned your push-in time, which again I think is a very common thing that we're doing for a multitude of reasons. Maybe could you give the listeners an example of just one of those sessions? Like what does your modeling look like? Do you have the paras involved? What does that kind of look like?
Yeah, the pairs are definitely involved. I'm kind of like in the front of our circle and they sit with a student. And then I do have a schedule of what we're going to do. We start with like the song. I have a student that loves to do, he scripts the whole thing of what we're going to do. And I've started to notice that it's because I'm excited. It's time. So but towards the end of the year, he started doing, it's time for group. I'm excited. So instead of just scripting exactly what we're going to do, but the song, then we'll do a book, and then we'll do playtime. And so then that time we are playing, we try to cooperatively play with something. If we can't cooperatively play because they're still in that stage where they have to line things up, they'll kind of be on the side with their own little toy, and then I'll kind of go into stations with the kids.
I love that because again, I think there's this misnomer that we have to pull them out and do only individualized therapy, and we just know that that's not realistic in our setting. And so knowing that you can meet kids in a group where they're at and be flexible and also try to adapt it to what their needs is such a good example. I love it. Um, what Let's talk about silence specifically, because I know you mentioned that's hard for you. It's
Yeah,
hard
it
for
is very
me.
hard.
I think it's hard for most of us, right? Because we want to be helpful. We also want to feel like we're doing something with the best intentions. But you mentioned that it's when you listen back or you look back, you're like, oh, it wasn't that long at all. So any tricks or any ahas that you've had as far as silence goes?
Definitely what has helped me is just taking the videos. Taking the videos and watching myself back has helped a lot. And then also just like counting in my head, just like I kind of remember not to talk so much with my kids. And then, but also whenever there is a natural time to acknowledge what they're doing, because then they kind of do look at you and make that connection. And then you'll get to the point where my student was and where he wants to have you join it. So just making sure that you're giving them the time, because I have my one student who just, I feel like he thinks that my time is playtime and he loves it, which is great because he likes to come. And then you get less behaviors, which is awesome, which I have really enjoyed as part of the way I do therapy now, is that I have less behaviors. And he has this gestalt, and I've asked his mom, I've asked all the other service providers, they've never heard him say it. So it seems like it's something of mine. He'll go into my room and he'll go, ladies and gentlemen, it's showtime.
Oh my God, I
So
love
funny.
that.
And so I just noticed that it's like something that he enjoys, that he gets to do on his own, and he gets to communicate and say whatever he wants and talk about what he wants to talk about. So I love it.
Oh my God, that's I think that must be like, it's either self-advocacy or just
Yeah,
shared joy, right? I
right.
mean, that's beautiful. Um, yeah. And it just goes, it reflects back on the importance of child-led, right? They know they can be themselves, and that point of connection is huge. Do you feel like, I forgot to ask you this with the language samples. I'm sure the listeners are wondering, have you seen progress as you've started taking data
Yes,
differently and doing
this
this differently?
year I have definitely seen more progress with my kids in their amount of how much they enjoy coming to school, how much they're engaged in their classroom. And I also, I mean, it's not just bragging about me for sure. It's also that the teacher that is in their classroom makes it a point to make social language important in their classroom as well. So yes, our kids have definitely grown this year. It's been an exciting year.
That's so exciting because I do think, people come back to, well, we don't have the research specifically to AAC yet, and the research is um not where we want it to be for Gestalt language processing, but the hope is that it's coming. But hearing so many of these clinical experiences of like, yes, these kids are making progress when we lean into this approach, leaning into how they're processing language and meeting them where they're at. So what would you say if someone is supporting a classroom of GLPs or someone they suspect might be a GLP, what would your advice be to them right now, whether it be a para or a teacher or another SLP?
First, take the course. Learning. If you feel like something in your gut like isn't right, the way I've always kind of felt with my students with autism, that I felt like my one autistic student, I remember a supervisor helping with a social story of, we don't talk about movies in class. And I've always like, oh, I don't like that. Like, it's just never felt right to me. And that's where I felt like the GLP training that I went through went with the neurodiversity movement and always felt good. And that I feel like you should just be a neurodiversity affirming therapist, not just because it's a good person thing to do, but because our kids are going to make more progress that way. Um, and then just like always looking for new ways of way you do therapy, talking to other people, asking. I email Laura all the time. I show her my videos and be like, what do you think? What do you think I should have done differently? And she gives me some tips. She usually talk less.
Only because it's what I think too. I'm like, oh man, talk too much.
Yeah, but I mean, in general, like letting them initiate and lead. I mean, that's
Mhm.
such a important piece of this, right? Like they're
Yeah.
teaching us alongside. Like if we're not learning, they're probably not learning either.
Right. Right.
And you mentioned taking the course. Even if you can't take the full course, which I know you've taken the full course alongside some other SLPs, there's now the free master class, which is about an hour long, and that is a great place to start. And we're going to have all these resources up on our website. We'll link them in the show notes. But I do think, just having that background of how can I be a better communication partner to our GLPs is huge.
Yeah.
Um,
And there is a part with AAC that I'm so excited to take this summer. So I'm actually starting it in July whenever we have our PD. But I've also just been researching the AAC portion. I was so excited when I saw this idea of putting like characters into their AAC of like, if I had a whole page of Mickey Mouse saying things, I know a kid that would have just been totally into his AAC of like, that's awesome. Like, however you can get Mickey Mouse's voice to do it. I was like, I should have done that so long ago. So that was just something I wanted to mention. That was a new tip that I learned.
Yes, I love it. Right, because it does for some kids, the synthesized speech of the system is enough. But for some, especially someone who might be in an early stage 1 or stage 2, that audio source and that original um, audio source matters. Like they may not be able to generalize um, hot dog, hot diggity dog to the sound that comes in with the device and I'll segment it out. It's not the same intonation. It's not the same melodic pattern as if you were to take a sound bite of hot dog, hot diggity
Mhm.
dog.
Right.
Not that I necessarily can. That's the first thing that pops into my head, but I've heard of several GLPs who can even do like the like
Yeah.
they can do Mickey just like that. Um,
Yeah.
so
And
yeah,
something
I
else about the stages that I wanted to say is that they don't move through them just like perfectly, because that's something that our type A SLP brain wants them to do. But just to know that like it's above 50% and that's where they are, because you can have like a stage 4 who picks up a new stage 1. I have that in one of my students. He's a really high level GLP processor, but he still will pick up some stage 1s, and that's okay. And that will happen. He picks up this, like, he's got this Midwestern, like he's had to pick it up from his dad. I know we've talked about a lot about medias, but I think he picked it up with his dad because I met his dad. And he says this like Midwestern, well, thanks for having me over. He'll say whatever the end of my session, but he doesn't mean it nicely. He's not really thanking me. He's saying, this is done. Let's get out of here. I want to
hmm
go on to the next thing.
hmm
It's so funny. We go, well,
That's so funny. But again, that's the key. Like I keep hearing this trend of you coming back to like you have done the detective work, right? Like you know them. There's so much to that.
right. And also just to mention about the kids that get stuck in the single words. I have a student that I told all the paras I set up and I said, oh, he must be just one of those that are analytical processors. And now I have to go back and go, no, I don't think so, because he knows every name of the sharks in a certain one puzzle, but does he know how to transfer the word shark into other things? So that's things about getting them stuck. And like if we just do drill work with them about certain nouns, they're going to get stuck in just knowing. I also have a student that's an incoming kindergarten that I'm so excited to work with because it was like, yeah, he's a GLP, but he knows Q. Q is for queen. So they were like, yeah, he knows all his letters. And I was like, I think he's a GLP. I think he memorized Q is for queen kind of thing.
Yeah, that's such a key component to it is if they are not generalizing, if they are not carrying that over, they can label or they can command all of these different words, but they're not able to autonomously create them around novel grammar. Like if they're not creating, and like you mentioned shark, right? If they can label all the sharks, but then they can't say like I saw a shark at the beach, probably you may wonder, we'll just put it that way, you may wonder if they are a GLP because they're not using it flexibly.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Justine, I know like it's been such a pleasure having you on because I think that you bring so much practical knowledge and some of these stories are going to hit home for so many people. I think that that will really have a lot of takeaways, but I can't let you leave without asking about your favorite AAC moment to date with with one of your AAC users.
Okay.
If it's a GLP, even better, but
I do
any
have a GLP story
okay.
that's hilarious. I also have two, but it'll be fast. I have one. I always wear my hair like this every single day. It's up in a messy bun every day, except one day when I wore it down. And my kid looked at me and said, oh no, it's a disaster. which is hilarious. But I still didn't pick up on what he was talking about. I was just kind of like affirming, oh no, it's a disaster. I didn't know what he was talking about, but we got in my room and he kept saying it and looking at me. And I was like, eventually I pulled up my hair. I'm like, oh no, it's a disaster. And he looked at me like, you got it. You finally figured out what you're talking about. And then he did this hilarious thing where he's the Mickey Mouse kid. He put his hand like on my head and was like, if you want the clubhouse to appear, you have to say the magic words. Mickey Mouse, like that's the phrase that they say. And I mean, you could take that and say, we had this really fun, wonderful reaction that was hilarious. Or you could have took that and I could have been like, we're not talking about Mickey Mouse, sit in your seat, don't touch somebody's head. Like, you know what I mean? Like they're just not there yet. They need their social interaction. It's not that I'm not assuming competence because they are very intellectually high, but they're just not socially there yet. They need to have time of building those connections and not have to follow these specific rules all the time with kids.
Yeah. Well, and just emergent language can look differently. And like I see that as a bid for connection, right? And like you mentioned, the bid for connection can either be like I'm acknowledging where you're at right now, or the bid for connection can be dismissed and not acknowledged. And like you said, you can either say, "Oh, no, we're not talking about that right now."
Mhm.
But then do you get more bids for connection, or do you get like, I'm not gonna even try, I'm not even gonna
Right.
bother? So if
Yeah.
you feel like the latter, if you feel like, oh, my kids aren't even trying to connect, this can make the difference for them.
Right. And I have one more funny story about my AAC user who he has LAMP on his AAC device, but he's becoming a lot. He's verbal, but he loves his AAC. I'm not taking it away. But Flamingo is either under birds or under zoo, but it's not the right place where he wanted them. Because
Okay.
he likes to just go through his animals. And so he'd open the page, there it wasn't, and he goes, Flamingo, where are you? It was so funny. But then he opened where it was and he pointed to where he wanted me to put it and goes, here it is from that little song that he has. And then when I changed it, he says, that's the good stuff. Like I finally figured
Look
it
at
out. Like my
that.
kids have so many gestalts now that my eyes are open to it. It's like, you would have thought, oh, that was just a funny thing he said, but it's something that he picked that up from somewhere and he's trying to tell me something now that I know so much more.
And I mean, there's just so much there that like the self-advocacy, like the autonomy, like with of him asking to program his device in a specific way that made sense to him, and
Mhm.
augmentatively like using the device while using spoken, whether that's flexible grammar or whether that's just a script, who cares, right? Like they
Right.
are using language to communicate. And uh, there's
Mhm.
just so much good, there's so much goodness happening. And I'm
Yeah, I have
just
a really
so
good caseload right now of like a lot of
yes.
fun stuff.
But it's a testament to the changes that you've made. I firmly believe that if you hadn't made these changes, you hadn't taken the class, you would still feel as frustrated as some of my SLPs as I did before I had all this information.
Oh, for sure. If I was being honest, autistic students were not going the direction that I thought I would go in my career because they have behaviors. I don't understand what they're saying. It's really hard to engage with them. But really, if you do the therapy right, it's not, and it's exciting whatever they do.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. And then when it all makes sense, then and that's how you know it's good, right? Because the language connections are being made, the connection between us as communication partners is there, and it's enjoyable. And that's what communication is about. So let's land the plane there because I think that's a good take-home message. Unless there's anything else,
Nope,
Justine,
that's great.
that's good on your end. Okay, so if someone had a question, a follow-up question, what's the best way to get in contact with you?
Probably email Justine at rsdmo.org is what I usually use for my Rockwood, but then I also have the Gamblin at SSD.
Okay, perfect. So we'll put that in the show notes. If you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out. It's been so great having you on. I just want to thank you for your time and just for all your expertise here and just your practical knowledge. I think it's going to be so helpful for everyone. Um, we hope that you guys have a good week ahead. And we just want to thank on behalf of Innovative AAC Solutions. Let's just thank Justine for being on again. And everybody take care.
Bye, thanks.
Hi, everyone. This is Bridget. I wanted to come on and show you an activity fun find, and it's an LED party light. This is what the box looks like in the IRC, so you can find it. Here's the set itself. So some of the gestalts you could do would be let's turn on. This is so much fun. Let's turn on music. Let's make it green. Let's make it stop. Some stage 2 gestalts would be it's and then the colors. Let's make it that color. I don't like it. I like it. And then the color. It's so much fun. Turn on music, turn off music, turn on lights, turn off lights. Want to turn it on, want to turn it off. Look, color, look at it go. And then stage 3 would be flashing lights, loud music, quiet music, red lights, blue lights, green lights, and then a variety of the different lights too. I hope you guys get to check it out and you have fun with it. It seems like it could be a really fun like party day in the classroom or party day in the therapy room, and bust out that LED party light. Check it out in the IRC.